Hello everyone, good morning, good evening. Today we'll try to understand Apex for our next interview. But we will not try to remember the question and answer. Instead, we will try to understand it logically, what are the limits, and how we can execute the Apex. If we understand these three parameters, we will be able to answer most of the interview questions without any problem. Let's start. Here we will try to cover 9 questions. In another slide, we will try to cover another 9 questions. That means total 18 questions we will try to understand logical so that we can answer any other question coming instead of direct question. First one, how Apex is different than other programming language. Let's say in market there are other programming language like C++, there are programming language like Java. Those are also object-oriented programming language. Apex is also a object-oriented programming language. But how Apex is different than C++ or Java? C++ or Java, those are general programming language. That means you can develop any application using C++ or Java. Whereas Apex is a unproprietary language of Salesforce. That means you can only develop Salesforce application logics using Apex. Second question, from where all points we can invoke Apex? Generally in Salesforce world, we used to say Apex is everywhere. That means whether you are writing a trigger, you are writing Apex, whether you are writing a batch class, you are writing Apex, whether you are writing an API, you are using Apex, whether you are invoking a invocable method from the process builder or lightning flow, you are using Apex. Even your hello world logic you can execute using an anonymous block. So if I'll try to count in this way, I can count like first trigger. From the trigger we can write Apex. From batch class we can write Apex. From your asynchronous Apex like future, queuable, schedulable Apex, those are from where you can execute Apex logic. Anonymous block, you can execute Apex logic. You can write APIs using Apex. You can call it from an invocable method, for example your process builder or flow. So that means you try to stretch your mind and try to remember all those things where you have used Apex so that you can get to know the scope of Apex. Third question, how do we validate test result in a test class? If you know, test class is one of the serious thing which happens in Salesforce production org. That means if you do not have 75% of test class coverage, you will not be able to deploy your code into production. So why do we write test class? Is it only because of the test coverage? No. We used to write test class so that unit level testing, that means a logical testing we can do at the earliest before we deploy it to production. So how we can validate that unit level testing? Using assert statement. Either system, when you are writing system.assert or system.assert equals or system.assert not equals. These are three things. System.assert, system.assert equals, system.assert not equals. These three things are we use to validate our output result against an input. Fourth, asynchronous Apex disadvantage. We know there are so many advantages of asynchronous Apex. That means when you write future method, queuable method, or a batch class or a schedulable class, those are all asynchronous Apex. There are so many advantages. It gives you additional limits and all those things as well. But if someone is asking you a contra question, what is the disadvantage of asynchronous Apex? Then probably we can answer it like Asynchronous Apex is kind of a fire and forget. That means once we fire, we cannot roll back it. For example, in Apex, we do transaction management using save points and rollback. Let's say in between, we have called a asynchronous Apex. For example, a future method call or a queuable method call we did. In that case, we cannot able to roll back that. Another disadvantage is like based on the Salesforce limits. For example, you may have certain number of future method call you can make in a single transaction. Also, sometimes you have seen that we cannot have more than one queuable job at a time. For example, you may be doing two queuable method call in the same transaction. So those are the limits we have. So considering the Salesforce limit, and another most important disadvantage is we cannot roll back it. Okay. Fifth one, how we do transaction handling in Apex. It is related to my previous question. As I was saying, transaction handling, that means let's say certain DML operation or multiple DML operation we wanted to complete or not at all, atomicity of database. In that case, how we can do transaction handling in Apex? Using the save point and rollback mechanism. If any error happens, roll back. If there is no error, it will commit. Sixth one, when do you think share class will not available for an object? If you know, when you have a standard object, for example account, automatically there is a shareable object called account share. If it is a custom object, let's say employee, then employee underscore share. Those kind of class or those kind of objects automatically got created in Salesforce if your organization-wide setting is not public read-write. If it is public read-write, for example, you have given contact or account as public read-write in the organization-wide default. On that case, if you have used account share or contact share, you will get a compile time error itself that sharing account share or contact share is not available or not a valid identifier. Seventh point, what are all keywords available for exception handling? Generally, when we say exception handling, we simply think try catch. One try block and n number of catch block we can have. But we forget to mention that there is also one more called finally. So finally block executes regardless of whether the exception happens or not. And we can have only one finally block for try block. And another one thing to remember is finally is optional. That means for a try, you need to have at least one catch, but you may or may not have a finally. Eighth point, how many catch block and finally block we can have for a try block? That is also again related to my previous question. One try block can have many catch block, but at least one catch block need to be there. Finally, we can have maximum 1 and minimum 0. That means we may require a finally or may not. Finally is absolutely optional. Ninth point, what is SEP navigation operator in Apex? This is a new feature in Apex. So if you don't know what is SEP navigation operator, try to explore on this. SEP navigation operator, generally we use a dot and a question mark. Dot and question mark, that is combinedly known as SEP navigation operator, that we use for null check. Next, another 9 question we will see in this slide. How to enforce security in SQL query. So security, generally we used to say with sharing, without sharing, through this way we can enforce security. But this is not absolutely correct. There is a keyword at the end of any SOQL statement or SOQL query statement we can add with security enforce. With security enforce, if you have given, that will enforce the security on the user mode, and it will only provide those records which are accessible to the context user. How to enforce security in a DML statement. This is something a new feature in Apex and which is in beta mode right now. Generally, we used to write, let's say, insert account list or insert space contact list. But now there is a new keyword available, insert as user then account list or contact list. That means as user. This is something now in beta, so it is not fully released, but as user if you'll add with your DML statement, insert or update as user, then the DML list, that means account list or contact list as user if you'll do, then you can enforce the DML statement security. Third question, any example you do in before trigger and any example you do for after trigger. Generally, those things we do in before trigger which are related to that context object. For example, on the context record, we wanted to add a validation message. We can do it in before trigger. On that context record, we want to set a default field or a calculated field. We can do it in before trigger. But what we do in after trigger, generally, which are not related to that context object directly, but to a related object. For example, I am inserting an account, on that I wanted to automatically insert a contact. That I can do in after trigger. Also, if you wanted to do any callouts to external system, direct callouts you cannot do, but using a future method or asynchronous Apex, you can make a callouts to external system in the after trigger context. How a static variable is different than a non-static variable. Static variable in Apex is something a stateful variable. That means it is valid or it retains its value throughout the transaction. A static variable most of the time we used to break the recursion and all. Non-static variable do not, it is within the scope of the block. It is not written throughout the transaction. Okay. So that is how we differentiate between static and non-static variable. How a schedule Apex is different than batch Apex. Schedule Apex, batch Apex, both are asynchronous Apex. Both have the similar kind of governor limits, but schedule Apex is only one method which is mandatory, is execute method. But in case of batch Apex, there are three methods: start, finish and execute. Three methods: start, execute and finish. Schedule Apex only one method, execute. Batch Apex three methods: start, then your execute, finish. How you can help your Salesforce admin to leverage your Apex logic? Let's say you have written Apex logic, but you want your Salesforce admin to leverage it in their non-coding platform like Flow or Process Builder. In that case, you can make the Apex logic invocable Apex annotation, so that whatever the logic you have written, they can also leverage in their Process Builder or Flow. 7th question. How you can pass a subject record to a future method? Generally, future method accept only primitive data types. Non-primitive data types like sObject list is not possible to pass to a future method. But if you really wanted to pass something, what you can do, you have only one option called serialize. You can serialize a subject and pass it as a string, and on the future method, inside that future method, you can deserialize it again. What are type of collection available in Apex? There are three types of collection generally available in Apex. First one is set. Set is a collection which can contain only unique values. you will not find a duplicate value inside a set. If you are adding two duplicate values inside a set, it will consider it as 1. But list, on the other hand, can accept duplicate value. Set, there is no indexing on set. But in list, you can store the values in index, 0th index, first 1 index, 2 index. Generally, index start from 0, not from 1 in list. Another thing is the combination of set and list, which is called map. That means in a map, your key is a set, whereas your value is a list. So map, we say, a collection of both set and list. The last question, what are all things Apex test class, sorry for the spelling mistake, Apex test class cannot do, not text class, test class cannot do. Generally, test class cannot send an email. Let's say you have written a send email logic, single email message logic. Test class cannot send an actual email. Second thing, test class cannot make a call out. Let's say you have API callouts. So test class will not be able to make a callouts. For that, you need to have a mock callouts for using your test class. Third thing, test class do not commit anything to your database. That means whatever DML operation you have performed inside your test class, all will be rolled back. It will not commit anything to your database. Another thing test class cannot do, it will not be able to access your transactional data like account or contact data or records from your, or unless and until you have not annotated see all data equal to true. Generally, it is not recommended to have see all data equal to true. I hope this 9 plus 9, 18 question will help you in your next Salesforce interview, and try to understand it logically. Don't try to remember exact thing. If you understand it logically, we will able to also answer other question which is outside of this question list. Thanks for attending this session. Thanks for watching this video. If you think this video is helpful and if you wanted to appreciate, please subscribe to this channel. Do a thumbs up if you like this video. If you don't like this video, don't forget to do a dislike as well. Share with your friends if you think it is valuable for them as well. Thanks for attending this session. Have a great day.